All right, let's dive right in. We're about to take a tour of the most fundamental building block of, well, everything that's alive. We're talking about the cell. It's this tiny, microscopic world that makes all life possible.
So, let me start with a question for you. What do you have in common with a giant tree? And what about a tiny microscopic bacterium? I mean, they look completely different, right? But believe it or not, you're all connected by one single fundamental truth.
And the answer is, you are all made of cells. That's it. Cells are the universal foundation for every single form of life we know about. It's the one thing that connects every living thing on this planet.
So what exactly is a cell? Well, think of it as the smallest possible piece of life. Every single cell, no matter what kind, has two key things. First, it has an outer boundary, kind of like a skin, called a membrane, and that protects it. Second, inside it holds DNA, which is basically the complete set of instructions for how to build and run the entire organism.
Okay, so we've established that everything's made of cells. But here's the thing, not all cells are built the same way. There are really just two basic designs. You could call them blueprints. You've got a simple version, and then you've got a much more complex one.
Let's break down the main difference. On one hand, you have prokaryotic cells. Think of bacteria. They have a really simple design. Their DNA just kind of floats around freely inside. But then you have eukaryotic cells. These are what make up plants and animals, including us, and they're much more complex. They have a special room, a compartment, called a nucleus, just to hold and protect their DNA.
So, if you look at a prokaryotic cell, you can see exactly what I mean. Everything's just kind of mixed together inside. The DNA, those important instructions, are just floating around in the main area. You could say it's a very open-plan design.
But a eukaryotic cell? Totally different story. It's way more organized. See how the DNA isn't just floating around? It's kept safe and sound inside that central compartment, the nucleus. And that protection is absolutely key. It stops those delicate genetic instructions from getting damaged, which is what allows for much more complex life forms, like us, to exist.
All right, so for the rest of our little tour here, we're going to focus on one of these complex eukaryotic cells. And where's the best place to start? Well, you've got to start at the heart of the operation, right? The control center.
And that brings us to the nucleus. Seriously, just think of it as the cell's command center or its brain. It has its own protective wall, and its single most important job is to guard that precious DNA, those vital instructions for literally everything the cell does. Now, if we zoom in even closer, inside the nucleus, we find another special little area. It's called the nucleolus. The best way to think about it is like a small factory inside the main office, and its very specific job is to build the parts for these tiny machines called ribosomes, which we're about to meet right now. Okay, so we've seen where the instructions are kept safe. Now let's see how the cell actually uses those instructions to build things. Welcome to the cell's protein factory. The whole process works just like an assembly line. It's pretty cool. Step 1. A copy of the instructions is made from the DNA, right there in the nucleus. Step 2. These little things called ribosomes grab that copy and use it to build proteins. Step 3. A big network of tunnels, the ER, helps fold the new proteins and move them along. And finally, Step 4. The Golgi apparatus packages them up, getting them ready to be shipped out wherever they're needed. So let's get a closer look at the workers on this assembly line, the ribosomes. These are the tiny construction workers of the cell. Their job is to read the instructions and then assemble the proteins, piece by piece. Okay, so after a protein gets built, it moves into the endoplasmic reticulum, or just ER for short. I want you to picture the ER as this huge, sprawling system of tunnels and canals all throughout the cell. This is where those new proteins get folded into just the right shape, and it's also the highway system that moves them to their next stop. And that brings us to the final stop in the factory, the Golgi apparatus. This is basically the cell's post office. It gets the proteins from the ER, does a little final processing, sorts them, and then packages them into these little bubbles called vesicles. You can think of vesicles as the cell's delivery trucks, ready to go. So any busy city, and a cell is definitely a busy city, needs two more really important things to survive. It needs a steady supply of power, and it needs a way to get rid of all the trash. So let's check out the essential services that keep this whole operation running smoothly. First up, the mitochondria. You've probably heard of these. They're famously known as the powerhouses of the cell, and that's exactly what they are. Their whole job is to take food and convert it into a usable energy molecule called ATP. Think of ATP as tiny, rechargeable batteries that power literally everything the cell needs to do.
Now plant cells, they have an extra trick up their sleeve, something animal cells don't have. They've got chloroplasts. Just think of these as the cell's personal solar panels. They can capture energy directly from sunlight and use that energy to make their own food. And that incredible process, as you might know, is called photosynthesis.
So what about all the waste and garbage? Well, in animal cells, that's where lysosomes come in. These are the cell's recycling centers. They're filled with these powerful enzymes that can break down any old or broken parts, keeping the whole cell clean and healthy.
Okay, so we've seen the control center, the factories, the power plants, and the cleanup crews. But, the most incredible thing about all of this is how all these different parts work together. A cell is so much more than just a bag of random parts.
So what are the big takeaways here? First, remember that all life is built from one of two basic designs, simple or complex. In those complex cells, the nucleus is the boss, the control center. All those different parts we talked about, they're called organelles, each have their own special job. And just like a city, a cell has everything it needs to build things, generate power, and clean up after itself. The key is that it all works together as one big cooperative system.
And that really is the beautiful part. It's this tiny, living system. Every single part, from the instructions locked away in the nucleus, all the way out to the membrane on the very edge, knows exactly what its job is, and it all works together in perfect harmony. When you really think about it, this microscopic city is the blueprint for all complex life. That includes you and me. And it kind of makes you wonder, right? What can this incredible tiny system of perfect cooperation teach us about the bigger rules that govern life itself?